When I found out that my wife checked into a hotel with another man, Vincent, my world collapsed. She tried to mask it with the excuse of work, but I knew that some things were already irretrievable. Welcome to the Love and Betrayed Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. My ex-wife 52 and I 53 had been married for 26 years. I'll refer to my ex as Sophie for the sake of the story anyway. Aside from those 26 years, Joe and I had known each other since we were 17. We attended high school together. I went to high school in the opposite area of town while she attended Catholic high school. We've known each other since high school. We chose to travel for a while and see what life has to offer, because we knew we wanted to create a family and that travel might be out of the question or would look different after we had children. Not only that, but I had come into some money after my grandfather died and he had left some land to my father, whom I then handed us a quarter section. When we returned, we constructed our own home on the land that had been passed down to me. Married, and Joe soon became pregnant with the first of our 4 sons. My family has a long history of farming. It is what we do best. I knew it was something I would eventually do, but it never concerned me. I didn't feel forced to do. It was something I was interested in and felt proud of. I'd been helping my grandfather and father on the family farm since I was a tiny child. It was in my bloodstream. Sophie came from a large blue-collar family. Her father was the best heavy-duty mechanic in the county and he had spent a lot of time on our farm repairing our equipment. That's exactly how we met. She accompanied her father one day when a piece of equipment broke down. We caught each other's attention, and the rest is history, as they say. Despite the fact that their father was who he was, she had never gotten her hands dirty before we constructed our house on the farm. I don't mean to brag, but my family was once one of the major dairy farmers in the north. As a result, my family's name became widely known and revered. I recall telling Sophie that there wouldn't be anything outside of the farm for me. I would like to work on it till I die, but she said she was fine with that. She informed me that she wanted this life and to be with me and that anything else was not something she wanted to be a part of. So she helped me run the property until around 4 years ago. Our boys had already reached adulthood. By then, men started their own families and helped out on the farm. Around that time she began working for a company comparable to Avon, which operated on a door-to-door cosmetic marketing scheme. A friend from out of town had coaxed her into it. She thought she'd do well in something like that, since she was so attractive and personable and she was well known in the area, having served on a number of councils and boards. These appeared to be her friend's words, hot and captivating. I encouraged her to take the risk and assured her that she would succeed, regardless of what she did. After her buddy stated that Joe kept asking if I thought she was pretty and attractive. This felt like it came out of nowhere for me. Joe was never the type of woman to doubt herself, and she was one of the most stunning ladies I'd ever seen. I told her she was beautiful and I attempted to say it to her every day afterward. It made me wonder if I hadn't said enough before that. Soon after I observed, Joe's enthusiasm for the farm waned. She just wasn't interested anymore and she didn't bother asking about my day or going out of her way to do minor duties around the farm. Not that I expected it, but that was what she generally did. We ended up talking and she said she didn't want me to be upset with her for taking on a new job, so I told her that I had plenty of help and that she should do what made her happy. I would never be upset with her for doing something that made her happy. She eventually accepted the position and is doing well for the company. After you sell a particular number of things, the corporation will buy you a vehicle, not just any automobile, but a high-end German vehicle. She eventually became regional manager and the corporation rewarded her and her hard work with a free automobile. I was quite proud of her, but as soon as she got the car, I noticed her personality change slightly. She drove about town as if her junk didn't sting, and I had to learn about it from spouses who had heard it from their wives. At first I assumed it was jealousy. I mean, it's not uncommon in a tiny town. People do not like change very much or like folks displaying their money. My wife had always been very humble. She had dressed properly, but not beyond her means. She was always in t-shirts and jeans, and my wife, for the entire time I've known her, had never had her nails done, but after that automobile she began getting her nails done and purchasing in all of these high-end outfits which she would drive straight into the city for. I'm not a fashionista by any means. I couldn't differentiate a designer from something you could buy at Walmart, but the clothing she was wearing were racking up the visa. Not that she wasn't paying it down, but I knew how much she was spending on clothes when the invoices came in, and it was more than she had spent on clothes in the previous 5 years. I tried to be supportive. She informed me that this position was all about image and standard. She claimed that no one would take her seriously as a seller of ladies' makeup and cosmetics, since she looked like she came straight from the farm. The way she articulated it made sense to me at the time. I thought, who am I to tell her what she can and cannot do with her money? Anyway, her profession allowed her to travel and work from home. The money she brought in allowed us to take occasional trips, but nothing too extravagant. I mean, we were not a Disneyland family. We've been to the Grand Canyon and Joshua Tree, but nothing beyond that. She used to travel to Miami, Las Vegas, San Francisco and New Orleans for conferences and meetings, to mention a few places. I mean, these were big enough cities to make a hillbilly like me feel overwhelmed. But when Joe returned home she'd be full of energy, and it was wonderful to see Joe fresh and invigorated. I honestly felt quite delighted for her. I can't recall precisely when this happened, but I believe it was around November when she approached me and informed me there was a male. I'll call him Vincent, and he had recently begun with the company. I thought it was strange to have a man in there selling women's makeup and such, when the firm was mostly women. But I thought, hey, the times are changing. She said that he was a sales director and wasn't selling the products himself, but that he was brought in to help the company grow. She explained that he came up with this fantastic concept to reward people who had made the highest sales of the year with a trip to Mexico in February. I thought, sweet, we're heading to Mexico. We have never been then. She informs me that there are only 4 people in the company, and friends and family are not permitted. I thought that strange, but I figured that since it was the farthest they'd ever traveled for something like that, they couldn't afford to give the trip to family as well. Family has been invited to various events previously, but nothing is extravagant in Mexico. So Surprise Joe becomes the top saleswoman in her district. As a result, she received this trip to Mexico as a prize. She was reportedly one of 11 ladies, along with a few regional directors and company executives, including Vincent. February shows up. She goes on this journey. I rarely hear from her when she is away on business, but this is not unusual. I also urged her to go relax and have fun, so I wouldn't be offended if I didn't hear from her because I knew she was trying to disconnect. I go to pick her up at the airport when she returns, and all I hear on the way home is damn this and damn that he is apparently 43 years old and has never been married. He is from Los Angeles and works remotely. She stated that this was her first time meeting him in person. She mentioned that he used to work as a car salesman. He appeared to be tall, dark and gorgeous, with good fashion sense. She admires his drive and he genuinely listens to her and what she says. Plus is really charming, and they spent the entire afternoon drinking at the poolside bar and playing beach volleyball. I didn't want to see him against it all, but the way she talked about him bothered me. On the one hand, I knew she was happy and enjoying fun and I was proud of her professional development, but on the other hand, the way she talked about him made me uncomfortable. Something about it appeared overly professional. Then again, I wasn't used to Joe. Actually working on the farm wasn't easy, but we did it together. I wondered if my sentiments were really jealousy, because I hadn't seen her operate in an atmosphere other than the farm, such as a corporate one. Let's fast forward to April. When I got inside, I found this box on the kitchen table. It's written to Joe, and I see the sender's name is Vincent. I simply had to leave it there and see whether my wife mentioned receiving anything from him at dinner over supper. I see she's sporting a new costly watch that I don't recall her stating she bought herself. She usually enjoys showing off her new purchases. I ask her about the watch and she says it just arrived today as a present from her workplace for all of her hard work. I inquired if it was from somebody in particular at her company and she responded no, it was just a group. Thank you. I did not ask any additional questions, but I knew she was lying. I knew it had nothing to do with her job, because her company frequently said things like that also use company-branded wrapping paper or letterhead. This seemed like Vincent had personally packaged it. Later that night we were lying in bed and I decided to ask her if she was drunk onto Vincent. She was astonished and insulted that I would even ask such a thing. She answered of course not and stated that I am the only male she has ever been attracted to. I wasn't convinced by this and informed her. I wasn't comfortable with her relationship. The Vincent, as you may expect, this sparked a major fight. She started talking about how there was nothing between them, that I was simply jealous that she was doing well for herself, that it had nothing to do with me or the property, and that I was upset with her for no longer working on the farm. I kept my position and told her it had nothing to do with the fact that she was no longer working on the farm. I stated that I did not trust Vincent and his intentions. I told her I recognized Vincent's watch. I added, imagine if someone sent me gifts like that and I kept them from you, and she says, but I'm not lying. I told you it was a present from the firm in recognition of my sales and smashing company records. She said that if I was smashing records, she hoped I was also being fairly compensated. Needless to say, I wound up sleeping in the spare room the next day. She spoke with me as if nothing had happened. The night before she attempts to warm me up by kissing and squeezing me, slapping my buttocks and telling me that she misses me. There was no apology. However, she suggests we take a trip together to get back on track. I am like, yeah sure, and it did seem hopeful at first until she stated she had a work trip this weekend and that we should discuss details when she returned. I am immediately skeptical. I ask her where she is heading. Why didn't you bring it up earlier? She told me in Asheville and then completely forgot, but it was an important one not to overlook. When I asked her whether there was anyone she was going to see specifically, she wondered what I meant and she claims it's for training, and she stated that the majority of the company would be leaving. It's mandatory. She said it was only for 3 days. There was no way I was giving her the benefit of the doubt at that time. It seemed too coincidence. I asked her where she was staying and where it was located, and she informed me about the Hyatt. So she embarks on her trip. It's Saturday morning and everything at home is going as usual for me, but then I received this call. It turned out to be an MA from the Hyatt Regency Phoenix, Arizona. Why would someone from the Hyatt in Phoenix be contacting me? She informs me that there is a minor issue with the room reservation under Sophie Blank. She stated that there were some problems with the payment method and that she needed to confirm the facts with me. She stated that the payment information on file did not match the cardholder's name and she asked me to verify the card details immediately. Soon red flags were raised. I inquire as to if anyone else is named on the reservation or if any further guests have been added to the accommodation. She remains quiet for a moment before saying it appears that another guest has registered for the room. Mr. Vincentinic blank. Is that correct, sir? And I'm like, honestly, that's not right. Can you tell me if they are both checking in right now? She says yes. Both guests checked in yesterday evening. I opted not to lose my cool and gave her my credit card and the conversation ended. I immediately texted Joe, only to receive a call from the hotel. Why has Vincent checked in with you? We need to talk now. She texted me back. It's work-related. He is here for the same training. There's nothing to worry about. I'll explain after I get back. I'm angry at this point. She attempts to text me again later that night, saying she is thinking about you, misses you and all that. But I am not reacting. She even attempted to phone me, but did not leave a message. I actually texted my brother and invited him to come over. We sat on the porch and I told him what had happened. He says he knows someone who can help me get my documents in order. If that's what I really want to do, I ended up emailing the person just to schedule an appointment to see what it would be like, but since it was Saturday, I didn't expect to hear back anyway. She arrives home on Sunday afternoon and my brother is still present. She asked her friend to drop her off. She goes to hug me, but I push her away saying, do you want to explain why Vincent was checked into your room? She explained that there had been a mix-up with the reservation and he had nowhere else to stay. Then I asked her how Nashville was. She says the weather was gorgeous and the cuisine was delicious. I thought that was interesting given that you were staying in Phoenix. She tries to appear dumb and I tell her that the hotel called me because there was a problem with the payment, which is how I learned about her and Vincent. She told me it's not what I thought. I tell her that everything looks precisely as it is and that she has been lying to me. I said she was stupid enough not to change the contact information on the travel rewards, so they contacted me right away when there was a problem with the payment. She tries to dispute it, claiming that she confused up the conference city when she first told me and that it was actually in Phoenix. I was not having any of it. Then she gets into hysterics and begins crying, telling me that it was only once and that it was a terrible mistake. She wanted to hug me and my brother had to basically rip her away from me. Then he tells Jo that she should pack additional stuff in her luggage, have her buddy pick her up and stay somewhere else for a time. Interestingly, she does heed to him and leaves the house. My brother remains with me that night and we have some drinks and discuss my next move. After that, we did some research and discovered that Vincent was married with 2 children, and because I had a few beers, I messaged his wife and informed her that her husband was cheating on her with my wife. I told her what I knew about the hotel and the gift he had bought for her. I wake up to Jo attempting to enter the house and she's yelling at me saying she can't believe I'd go so low as to disseminate false information about her. Then I tell to stop the act, because I know she is seeing Vincent. She attempts to cry crocodile tears, but I basically tell her I don't trust anything she says. I told her she'd be better off telling me the truth. Right now then she admits she was extremely unhappy for all those years. She claimed she despised working on the farm and she's been living a lie. She explained that she started this work and then met Vincent and everything changed for her. She stated that she finally felt free and like herself after feeling gorgeous, loved and desired. Then she begins insulting me, calling me a filthy, ignorant pig. I asked her why she stayed when she despised our life together so much, and she replied she believed it would get better or that she would be able to travel more and do fancy things. But then I was such a cheapskate. I told her that I never stopped her from doing anything, that we could have flown and gone out to beautiful restaurants if she wanted, but she never mentioned anything to me. I told her that if she had only said something to me, we could have had a shot, and she said you had a chance, and that's when I informed her I couldn't find a divorce lawyer. Then she begins to beg my forgiveness and cry. She claimed she did not mean it. She stated that she has no idea what came over her. She simply enjoyed how he looked at her. I said I've been looking at you like that since we were 17, but you were too blind to notice. I told her to leave the house and she ultimately did after I threatened to contact her father. So fast forward to the divorce. Obviously I had a lot more to lose than she did, but happily I was able to spend that money on a competent lawyer, which he was. He was wonderful. My brother persevered admirably by the time the divorce was over. I had everything I desired. I maintained the house, farm and business. I returned her shares in the company, as well as a few acres of land that I no longer need. I don't really know what happened to Vincent. His account eventually went private, so I couldn't see what was going on in his life. However, the images on his wife's account show that she is now his ex-wife. All of the photographs of him that were previously available have been erased. My brother and my boys were extremely supportive throughout this process. They were not pleased that their mother had cheated on me, and it made family gatherings difficult for a while before she simply ceased turning up to save face. Anyway, I'm moving on and life on the farm is flourishing. Business is good. As I have stated, I will remain here till the day I die, and I'm quite fine with that. Here is the future. Sophie's path from the farm to the glittering world of cosmetics appears to have taken an unexpected turn along Heartbreak Highway from mechanical repair to entering the business world. She traded her farm boots for high heels and became entangled in a maze of trails and flashy cars. Vincent, the slick salesperson, proved to be more trouble than he was worth, leaving a trail of shattered hearts and social media accounts. Meanwhile, you weathered the storm with the help of your lads and a skilled attorney, securing the farm, the business and your peace of mind. While Sophie pursued visions of city lights and scandalous vacations. You remained in fields where honesty and hard work are still valued. Here's to a future free of drama and full of healthy soil, where the only surprises come from Mother Nature, not errant husbands. Here is the next story. James, I had plans. I had dreams, for heaven's sake. I even put up a hidden investing account for an exceptional trip around the world that we intended to take in just a few years. I was watching my better half, with whom I've been together for 23 years, blush heavily and continue to glow pink while conversing with 2 or 3 co-workers at her college administration's annual staff meeting in mid-September. I was 15 feet away from my beloved conversing with her co-workers when I noticed her reaction. Isabella was conversing with Nathan Searcy, the new English literature professor I knew, and Melissa Barnes, who, like Isabella, worked in the organization department. Given that this was a Christian institution, I doubt either of them had tolerated any inappropriate correspondence. But Isabella's tone, particularly her intonation, could only be explained by one factor: she was thrilled about something. Now I might have a response to a question I hadn't asked before. When you've been married to someone for a long time and you've been together for 25, you get to know almost everything about that person, regardless of whether you weren't paying much attention, assuming you were focusing well. 10 minutes ago, I thought I had an ideal relationship with an inherently wonderful woman. I was currently solving the puzzle of a piece of my better half's new peculiar style of acting, which I had not comprehended until that point. Isabella and I were the most beloved friends, favorites and caregivers for 2 remarkable children. Not at all. Like most married couples, we could spend days together without growing tired of one another. We may talk about everything from news to history, and much of the conversation was accompanied by laughter. I used to joke that the most effective way to test marital compatibility was to take a lengthy car journey with your prospective partner, and if you didn't murder him, married him right away. Isabella and I meet that criterion well. I would want to think that our marriage was ideal. Sure, it had cooled down from the excitement and early marriage, but it returned when the younger of our 2 kids started school a year earlier. The fact that we were a single-parent family for the majority of the year rekindled our attraction to one another. We were both in terrific form at 45, thanks to our passion for fitness. Isabella had long blonde hair and a stunning physique. True, she weighed 15 lbs more than she had before our children were born, but that was still good, and I'm 20 pounds heavier than when I graduated high school 2 months earlier. Our relationship had begun to improve. At the moment, however, I didn't pay much attention to what was actually going on. Tracy claims to have always participated in her nighttime routine, but she rarely initiated it. However, things changed dramatically and she began to take the initiative herself, but somewhere in the back of my mind I realized it wasn't love, but rather instinct, like animals. I didn't pay attention at the time, but now I understand it was a mistake. Except when I was around her. Isabella and Nathan were seldom more than 5 feet apart when strolling. Now that I understood what I was seeing, I could see Isabella's bright glow shine whenever she was around Nathan, even when I was nearby. It generally vanished as soon as I appeared, but as soon as Isabella moved away from me, she would find a social partner. I silently studied the do throughout the ceremony, even though it did not require much effort. Tracy seemed to lose track of everyone else when Nathan was present. I never saw her look around for her husband throughout the evening. She made a point of gently touching him whenever possible. My emotions ranged from apprehension and fear to complete wrath. After determining how the event was unfolding, I realized that what I was witnessing resembled the end of my marriage at around 11. I practically had to take my better half away from Nathan. She didn't seem happy when I appeared and told her it was time to leave. Briefly, her eyes were filled with fury. Then she toned things down. However, it was not fast enough to prevent me from seeing the look again, the 23-year marriage thing. Normally, the night's discussion would have flowed non-stop on the ride home, but I sat inconspicuously expecting Isabella to initiate it herself. She appeared to be engrossed, peering out the window for a while before realizing it had grown strangely quiet. Then she broke the stillness with some foolish remark about how scruffy the school president's spouse was. I did not agree with that conversation. "Wow, I'm quite exhausted. I'm going to bed now," Isabella stated when we arrived home. "Are you coming?" I wasn't sure if she was simply trying to avoid conversing for the remainder of the evening or, conversely, if she was attempting to convince me that I needed to go to bed to avoid the frustration of being awake all night. In any case, I did not argue and informed her that I intended to binge-watch TV for a while. I believe she seemed upset. The following day was Saturday, so I had the opportunity to spend the entire day outside working in the yard, which allowed me to relax and think things over properly. If Isabella was aware that things were not going well in our universe, she made an effort not to show it for the rest of the week. The house was tight. As for me, I tried not to let it show instead, using the Find My Phone app on my iPhone numerous times a day, and in all situations, Tracy was exactly where she was supposed to be. She appeared to be well prepared for our vacation together. As the evening approached, nothing changed on the following Monday, however. On Tuesday, the Find My Phone app informed me that Isabella had returned home 15 minutes after noon. I entered my residence quietly and confirmed that my marriage had ended. Our bedroom wasn't very quiet, so I didn't need to tiptoe up the stairs to check that Isabella's partner was undoubtedly Nathan. It was a good thing I had the self-control to not approach them and cause a scene. It was not worth going to jail for Isabella. I am quite aware that loving my better half more than everything else in the world appears selfish, but it is the complete truth. I've loved him for a quarter of his century, and I'm ready to love him another quarter. However, in light of a reasonable concern for the story's completion, I must also confess that I have a loved one who has fallen by the wayside, a lover who was so wonderful that I couldn't leave him, even though I know I'll have to someday, since it's the only way to save my marriage. James, my lovely hubby, would have been devastated to learn that I had a lover. That's why I made every effort to conceal my secret. However, I wasn't naive enough to believe it would never be discovered. I recognized that the longer this went on, the higher my chances of getting detected became. James had been my stumbling block for the past 25 years. We hadn't been married in 23 years and had 2 beautiful children. He was my best friend and an ideal partner. We discussed everything. We laughed a lot, all of this, despite the fact that until lately, I had no desire for a partner. I had no desire for a lover. When I met Nathan Cersei for unknown reasons. He arrived to our organization a few days before school began, and without exaggeration, my life changed dramatically. Nathan was 30 years old, tall and very trim, with short earth-colored hair and kind black eyes. For the next 14 days, I did not leave James's side, and then my lovely spouse provided me with an opportunity because he needed to travel out of town for an overnight stay the following Wednesday. I knew it wasn't serious, but I was shivering when I contacted Nathan on Monday morning and invited him around for supper on Wednesday. I checked Nathan's calendar ahead of time and saw he didn't have any classes on Wednesday night, so I took the night off to do some administrative work. Nathan met me at a small Italian restaurant and we had a good lunch. While talking and laughing a lot, I realized I was laughing a lot and making some strong pushbacks, keeping my hands off his arms and palms. While we talked, I blushed immensely and felt like a girl on a completely new date. Nathan and I had never discussed taking a rest. He did, however, understand the expectations. He grinned a lot at me, held my hand for a while and then sneered irregularly. I recognized he had a same connection as the cultured man. Nathan paid the check and then expressed himself softly. "Where is my home? I reside a little away from here. Please leave your vehicle and I will drive." I responded in a voice that sounded much more confident than I was, knowing James would not be home until Thursday night alleviated a lot of my anxiety about the upcoming event, though I must admit that I was still nervous. I realized that after having 2 children and being 45 years old, I no longer had the body of a nubile, youthful thing. Nathan was undoubtedly used to it. I should have had a realistic outlook on what I was going to do. However, for reasons unknown, it was a done deal with me. I loved James with my entire being. However, my encounter with Nathan was unavoidable, and I will not spoil a moment of pleasure by feeling guilty. I've directed my automobile into the carport and lowered the entryway. The next 10 hours were among the greatest of my life. My new boyfriend proved to be far more capable than my husband. Everything was fantastic. "You were an incredible woman, Isabella." This was certainly the most enjoyable event of my life, Nathan. I knew precisely what Isabella McWan wanted from me. When she called, I'd seen how she reacted when I met her 14 days ago in the administrative building. I figured we'd do each other after lunch, even though she'd never said it outright. This lady had a very attractive face, nice form, with beautiful golden hair. When I initially met her, I observed a band on her finger, but I quickly recognized that this did not rule her out. We had a nice lunch, and then she invited me to her home to spend the whole of the day in the marital bed. Apparently her spouse was away, so we had a terrific time. When the Uber drove me to my car in the restaurant parking lot, I knew there would be another day like that and possibly more than one. James Trace's level of deception astounded me. The following week, she continued to play the role of the ideal Oscar-winning wife. While I silently prepared for my approaching arrival, on Wednesday morning, I met with my attorney, who informed me that Isabella would receive a subpoena the following Wednesday, even though we lived in a no-fault state. I filed for divorce based on infidelity. It was petty. I had no idea how I had driven my better half to be in the arms of another man, or was it because he was around 15 years younger than me? In any case, it was a nobody's time shattered, as if I required confirmation. The Find My Phone app revealed that Isabella had returned home in the afternoon 3 more times in the previous 10 days. I didn't feel compelled to return home just to discover that Isabella was not coming home to eat cheddar sandwiches. I chuckled to myself at the idea at some point during that time. I reached into my snack cabinet for a bag of brown sugar and cinnamon Pop-Tarts, but we couldn't discover any. I ate the penultimate packet the day before, knowing there was only one remaining. I also knew Tracy wouldn't eat them because she despises Pop-Tarts. So was not only stealing my wife but also my snacks. Damn him, Isabella. I awoke early Thursday morning feeling out of sorts after the happiest night of my life. In theory, I should be remorseful, but I just craved more. I waited until midday before calling Nathan. My husband will not arrive until at least 9:00. If you arrive soon after I finish at 5, we'll have enough energy for one more round, perhaps two. I said magnificent. Nathan answered. I love a lady who knows what she needs. Nathan departed around 7:30. I made the bed quickly and washed the blankets. For the second time in 2 days, I made sure to place 2 loads of sheets at the bottom of the laundry basket. I felt fantastic when washing in the shower. An hour and a half later James entered the driveway. I hugged my hubby tight. I just adored this man. Admittedly, I felt a little terrible when James rushed me into the room for a quick cuddle. That was amazing, James. I whispered quietly as we snuggled into each other. I honestly meant it. James was a huge douche, but with Nathan it felt like we were doing something very different than James and I had. I have no regrets about attaining such an incredible feat if James was for the feelings. Nathan was looking for beautiful, genuine feelings, and I intended to appreciate it while I could. James, I knew Isabella was due to receive the legal papers on Wednesday at 10 a.m. 2 minutes had gone before my phone rang. No, James, I do not want a divorce. She shrieked into the receiver when I answered, and I don't want a cheating wife as a spouse, but we don't always receive what we need, right? I responded. I could explain. I made a decision for myself. We need to discuss it. Tracy exclaimed. Since you have ignored our vows and ourselves, I have taken a decision for myself as well. So no, we do not need to discuss your decision. I said, concluding the conversation. I was truly prepared to be productive in my career. Unfortunately, I knew what awaited me when I got home and Isabella was not upset. Don't you think you should have talked to me before pursuing a legal divorce? Isabella yelled as I entered the home. All things considered, we had been married for quite a while. Why it doesn't seem to matter to you? After 23 years of repeatedly undermining my reputation, I answered her. Isabella had been crying as seen by her teary eyes and smudged makeup. I wasn't happy about it. I love you, James. I really do. What I had with Nathan was just physical. Yes, it was. You make your own decisions. I finished for her. No doubt Isabella seemed upset. I regret for insulting you, but I believe you are exaggerating. We can talk about this, she said. I don't understand how, Isabella, you've cheated on me numerous times, probably more often than I realize. I said. I know it appears dreadful, James, but I understand it was entirely your choice, Eve. I repeated, how could you clarify that for me? I thought it was understandable that I was scoffing, but Isabella appeared encouraged by my response and grinned at me. I'm not sure what that implies, but we appear to have a truly unusual link when he's around. My likes increase and everything. Best vacation of your life. I finished and her eyes grew as big as saucers and she appeared terrified. Did you hear that? She looked at me with regret and dread at the same moment. Do you insist that I duplicate it for you? I was at home a week ago. You were both so upset and making a mistake that you didn't hear me. I'll never forget that blunder. It was completely physical. James, I love you. I can't tell you how much I adore you. Can't we put things right? I recognize I harmed you, but I also realize you genuinely love me. She was correct about the last one, which hurt the most for what it's worth. I did value her, just not as much as I had 14 days ago within a quarter of a century. Love for someone does not vanish overnight. Isabella. Even though I knew I was doing something dangerous, I was taken aback when I received the legal documents in my office on Wednesday night. I had no suspicion that James was aware of my affair. Heck. On top of that, he certainly caught Nathan and me together, and the video is even more damning. He had heard me tell Nathan that he was the best man I had ever had. I understood I would never be able to develop the bond Nathan and I had, but I knew James's admiration would prevail in the end. As a backup plan, I would try to persuade James to let Nathan be my lover and then return to saving the marriage as a last resort. I offered to consult and he accepted. A most memorable encounter with the counselor ended up being a disappointment for me. The counselor turned out to be a woman, but she, like James, failed to recognize that I could not manage my feelings for Nathan. I suppose I anticipated her to be understanding and possibly become an ally. Mrs. Moine, weren't your commitments important to you at the time? She asked when I was finished telling my story. No, they mean more to me than the entire world, whatever it is. This is unique, I explained. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. You are a lady, you've experienced arousal before. Really, it's like that, only much more down to earth. Almost as if I had been sedated, I explained that the look on her face indicated that she did not trust me. James, on the other hand, simply seemed stunned. Men are typically accused of having little brains, but women are also guilty of this. Based on today's divorce statistics, the counselor calmly informed my wife that while thunderclaps are real, most individuals understand that they can choose to ignore them. You, on the other hand, have decided to succumb to your baser desires. I couldn't believe this woman was essentially telling me I lacked self-control. It was equivalent to calling me a. She then asked me the question that most likely led to the split: if James could rationalize and bring you back, do you think you'd be able to go against your true wants and stay with the man you love? Damn, I had a hunch. This lady would be my ally. I stayed standing, hesitant to answer the inquiry. James would know better than a line locator if I was lying. I love you, James. Could you please work with me on this for once? I don't treasure it, but I must have. It is an experience in my life. Please do not demand that I give it up. I burst into tears after finishing my speech. I took a brief peek at Mike, expecting to see signs that his determination was fading. After all, he acknowledged to still loving me. I saw dead eyes. Nothing. Please accept my apologies, Isabella. I genuinely care about you, but I refuse to give you the right to undermine me. Besides, I can't forgive what you've done. Accept my apologies. I wasn't man enough for you. Mike, you are more than man enough for me. I love you. I stated I didn't love him. I am willing to give him up if it means we can be together. Please do not give up on us. I am not giving up on you as it is. You abandoned us the first time you slept with that dumbass. He responded. Please do not take it out on me. I didn't realize you were so self-centered. Everything basically revolves around you. More than that, you simply don't value me, regardless of how much I love you. 14 days after my final session with the counselor, I was in my room with Nathan. I wasn't sure whether James was watching me, but I didn't care. I had noticed Nathan nearby the day before and phoned him when he arrived at my office. He happily agreed to attend the midday meeting. The divorce was completed 6 months after the incident. During that time, Nathan and I took numerous holidays. The vacations were generally fantastic. He was my kryptonite. I adored James by Nathan. I needed to possess him. I realized I might never get James back. He didn't love me enough to let me keep Nathan James. I couldn't believe Isabella was attempting to indoctrinate me into allowing her to leave her beau, despite the fact that she would remain married to me. If you truly love me. What a drowsy capricious ignoring the beau. We had no plans to remain married, period. I may have been a dumbfounded cuckold, but I would not have been a numb cuckold. I was particularly surprised that the marriage counselor we were assigned did not live in Fairyland, as she had at her most memorable able meeting. She essentially called my other half A, and things haven't gotten better since she ended our meetings after the 4th, indicating to my other half that it was nearly impossible. Then I planned to leave my situation, and they supported me. I thought Eve was going to fall through the floor when the lawyer informed her that the meetings were over. I'm not sure if Isabella asked my young daughters to stand up for her. They made a decent effort, though. You are ruining the family, Daddy. When I told my youngest daughter this, she cried, no children. I am not destroying the family. That's what your mother did. I am just making it legal. I said. She gave a grimace and frowned. I could tell she was considering her options. I suppose there is no doubt about it. She finally said, Nathan. I have no desire to destroy Isabella's marriage. However, I saw it more as her husband's problem. I understood that she adored the man, but we had an incredible physical connection. If she had any desire to have me, I couldn't refuse her. I couldn't blame him for not wanting to be cuckolded, but that was between Eve and himself. It wasn't any of my business. Isabella avoided me for a long time after James filed for illegal divorce. When he didn't give up and take her back, we resumed our relationship. Truth be told, things even improved. Considering the fact that with James' estrangement, I was getting all of her attention. I have to say that Isabella was the best person I had ever dated. Though Isabella was extraordinary, I never suspected we would last any real length of time at 45. She wasn't fit for marriage. I realized I needed offspring of my own, and she already had 2 children. Besides, if she could treat a man like that, whom she said she loved, no matter what could I expect? I continued to look for Miss Right, even though I hadn't discussed it with Eve. After losing James, her thoughts of affluence were at the forefront of her mind. That changed when I found Lucy Ralston about a year after breaking up with Eve. She was 24, short, earth-colored hair, a flexible artist's body, and we hit it off immediately. I didn't enlighten Isabella about Lucy from the beginning, but I finally came clean about 2 months later. I realized that I had put Isabella in a terrible mood, but it wasn't as if Isabella really cared for me. She and I absolutely genuinely associated, but genuinely we were just old buddies. The moment Lucy and I centered on each other, I needed to tell Isabella that it was over between us, and yet I gave up my soulmate for you, exclaimed Isabella. When I told her that no, you didn't do that. You left your husband to sleep with me. It was never us here. Everything revolved around intimacy. Moreover, it was your decision. However, it's not my decision. My decision has to do with having a spouse and family. I said, Isabella, I was saddened when Nathan informed me that he had picked Lucy, and yet I gave up my soulmate for you. I exclaimed when he told me that. Nathan threw me a glance in which I saw pity. No, you didn't do that. You left your husband to sleep with me. He corrected. I recognized he was right, but at the same time then, of course, there was the embarrassment of my kids finding out about it when we broke up. Mike didn't go to Lily by telling the kids that I had cheated on him numerous times. None of the kids were happy with me, but gradually they got over it. Informing them a year and a half later that Nathan had left me to start a family with a younger lady made me appear pathetic even to myself. I didn't ask them not to tell my father, but I hoped they wouldn't. Admittedly, I wasn't too keen to talk about this event in my life. When the kids arrived home for Christmas, my oldest daughter calmly inquired if they were going to meet my boyfriend. At that point I acknowledged that we were no longer together. So you traded up a quarter of a century with your father for 2 or 3 years of living with a younger man. God pause, accept my apologies. My daughter bemoaned just a few years of the best pleasure of your life. There was little I could say. I gazed at the floor. I tried to be sensitive when speaking with the kids and asking about Mike. I didn't think he was dating, so I still had a chance of winning him back. I knew the possibilities were minimal, but why wouldn't he date me if he was already dating divorced women? We enjoyed a wonderful marriage for 23 years. However, I was aware that if this was to occur, I would have to be the attacking party. James, maybe you should join me for some espresso. I said after he answered the phone I called several months after the occurrence. I realize I hurt you with what I did and I apologize, but I sincerely wish we could be buddies, the kind that drink espresso together and may even eat together on occasion. I genuinely miss sitting around with you and talking. Sure, Isabella, we could do it. I suppose, he said cautiously. I genuinely miss hanging out with you and I believe I'm in a much better mental state than I was. We scheduled our espresso date for the following Saturday. James, I had to admit that Isabella looked stunning when she stepped into the Starbucks where we had agreed to meet. I hadn't seen her in 2 years and time hadn't affected her in the least. She didn't appear any more well-fed and her weight was likely the same as the last time I saw her. She had cut her hair to her shoulders and the tight sweater she wore highlighted her stunning figure. She wore little makeup, emphasizing her beauty. I started up to greet her, but stopped abruptly, unsure whether I should hug her or not. She answered that question for me by confidently entering my space, gently kissing my cheek and folding her arms around my chest. I returned the hug. Why hasn't someone stolen you already? I asked her sincerely. She blushed charmingly. Apparently not everyone has your good taste, she said pleasantly. I lowered my gaze to redirect my attention. We ordered for espresso and each received a brown county. We discussed a variety of issues, just as we did when we were married. The chat was so interesting that we each ordered a second cup of Starbucks coffee. That was fun, Isabella. I replied as we stood up to depart. How about we eat out next time? I guess I startled her with that greeting, since her eyes burned as she glanced at me. Sure, that would be fantastic. She said, really, give me your cell phone and I'll enter my new number. I contacted her 14 days later and arranged up a date. It had been a long time since I had a date, totally none since Isabella and I split up. Despite the fact that I was crushed by how Isabella had treated me, I made an honest effort to appear detached from the general population. Regardless, what she did really broke my heart and I had avoided all girls since the separation. Isabella and I had an excellent lunch at our favorite Italian restaurant one Saturday evening. I knew she expected me to welcome her to my condo after lunch, but she had unrealistic expectations. I took her to her car in the parking lot, kissed her on the cheek and then walked to mine. We indulged in a few snacks during the next year. I limited it to snacks because I felt more in control of the situation. You get 2 after supper. I wasn't going anywhere near that. Isabella. James probably become more clever over time. I realized he took part in our time together. However, he never invited me out to dinner. I expected him to go there eventually, and from there it would only be a small step toward us spending the night together. I recognized he wasn't dating and I figured if I could shake his reality once I'd have a fighting chance to win him back. He simply never gave me the opportunity. Once again, I hope he isn't too helpful in ending up in bed. I tried so hard to understand and started dating again. I suppose I'd just have to admit that I was probably going to be another piece of ass on the dating scene. James Isabella had gotten me so far in over my head that I hadn't dated anyone for a long time. I certainly did not consider the snacks Isabella and I were eating, even though I understood she considered them dates. I was in my favorite liquor store looking through the many brands of tequila seeking for something new. When I realized Isabella's presence, she was clearly doing the same thing. She seemed lovely enough and I believed she could benefit from my considerable knowledge of excellent spirits. I was only trying to be polite. Would you like to drink or try the tequila? I could never choke down a good tequila. I drink tequila like I drink espresso straight up with nothing. She said margaritas are wonderful for parties, but when I drink for real I don't mix. Wow, a lady with knowledge. I had no idea about any lady who consumes tequila directly from the glass. It's interesting that I went to meet this person drinks tequila while on the run and looks great doing it. There was no ring on her left hand either. I assumed she was slightly younger than myself. She wore a mop of wavy dull, reddish-brown hair almost to her shoulders. Her complexion was pale and her eyes were bright blue. I believed it was an Irish girl who resembled me. I hadn't realized I was gazing until she spoke and then I noticed she was asking me a question subtle, genuinely unobtrusive, she claimed. When I returned to my current world, I noticed I had turned pale. Please appreciate my apology. I was confused at the time. I replied softly. There are 12 different types of tequila and a lovely lady who knows how to drink them. This doesn't happen very often in my reality. She grinned crookedly when she talked again. I knew she was going to continue. Furthermore, Mr. Tequila, what kind of world is this big talker? She inquired. Loserville, USA. I murmured. Did you just call me? She questioned Wally. Wow, I think I'm your mother or something. Sorry for that. It is a habit. Put it down to my parents. And anyway, you don't look like my mother. I adore my mother, but did she ever look as good as you? So why Loserville? Mr. Tequila, you don't appear to be having trouble obtaining a date or two. I haven't been out on the town in 5 years since I split from my cheating spouse. I said discreetly, oh, I'm sorry about that. She added, appearing embarrassed. There was some awkward stillness for a few moments. I needed more gain to get out of the trap, and she thankfully did so. What are your suggestions? She inquired. Turning back to the tequila, I like where Julio Blanco is and I also enjoy the new individual theory Sammy Hagar, Santo Tequila. I responded anyhow for a very great event. Where will you choose Julio 1942? It's really expensive, but it's an excellent piece. What do you consider expensive? She asked. I said $85 per chunk, first-rate stuff. She motioned to me that the talk had ended. I thought I had snatched a Santa shrug off the rack, but then I realized what on God's green earth. I extended my hand to James Morn. Maybe you'd like to examine tequila up close with me, then you can make a more informed decision. I said, giving her a serious look. She gave me her strange grin again, located me and lowered her eyes conspiratorially before acknowledging my admission. We went to the bar and spent the next 2 hours studying tequila. By the glass I made sure to bring us 2 or 3 servings of appetizers, since I didn't want us both going to jail for DUI. When we left the pub, I had Monica's strewn digits for the entire following week. I couldn't understand what was going on in my thoughts. I was overjoyed to have received the phone number of a lovely lady. However, this meant I had to ask her out. That time I went out on the town right before the American Transformation hell. I considered asking her out to a coffee shop. Perhaps I can discover a roller skating rink. Alternatively, consider a bowling alley. It made me nauseous. I had a solid work and was making decent money. People generally loved me. I was up to that and could never debate legislative concerns around town. I noticed I was sweating tremendously. I noticed that some aspects had not changed in terms of dating. The ladies are well aware that they wield absolute authority. However, she provided me her phone number without my threatening her with a pistol, which should have served as support for me, correct? The conversation in my head lasted several days and may have gone on much longer if fate had not interfered. Fate disguised herself as Sarah Sortino, whom I met in person in the lobby of my workplace. I'd been looking for a solution for Monica for quite some time before I came across Sarah. She faltered in her 3-in-heels and I grabbed her hands to save her from falling, while saying, "I'm sorry, I know I'm not huge, but I doubt you'd notice I'm here." Sarah asked whether I was wearing costly clothes once I had calmed her down problems. Sarah was probably around the same age as my younger daughter. We had occasional conversations with me, basically offering to protect her from anything. She also served as my personal counselor when I was younger. If I truly needed clarity on anything generational that I'd prefer not call my children, I'd go to Sarah and she'd explain things to me up close and personal, in language that sounded nice to my young mind. In reality, I murmured perhaps looking like a pathetic clown. Sarah looked into my face as if looking for a sign. She let out a guarded, silly smile. I was perplexed. That was natural. Could this inquiry be addressed to a young lady? She spoke in her sing-sangy voice, sort of "you better believe it." "I guess it is, yes really," I mumbled. She glanced at me for a few moments before making a decision. "Okay, we can chat about it after work at Murphy's. Besides, I don't need to be bullied while drinking my free drink and you'll be all alone," she said. Sarah leaned back in the chair opposite me, looking very attentive while I struggled and mumbled about Monica. "We soon met at Murphy's, so you haven't dated anyone since you broke up a while ago?" "No one." "Wow, I knew you sucked, but I didn't think you had become pathetic." She spoke mockingly. I flinched at the humor but understood Sarah was correct. Besides, I knew her tone toward me had been passionate the entire time. "So how long ago did she give you her number? Is it safe to assume we're still at the same time of year?" "It was 5 days ago, and if you keep being smart I'll put you over my knee," I warned, only half serious. "Oh, we can do it together," she responded. One of us blushed, but it was not her. "Seriously, James, what is the matter? You are not a barbarian. You have a lot on your plate. Call her," Sarah advised. Sarah spent the next half hour telling me about some of the activities she and her dates undertake. On dates, I resisted the want to whip out a notebook and take notes. "Can you dance?" she asked at one point. "Is the Pope incompetent?" I responded. "So I'll take that as a no. Ladies enjoy it when men take the initiative. It is a type of physical action. It piques my interest," she added with a big smile. "Really, I thought that was a capital legend." I said 100, "It's like foreplay," she explained. "La la," I replied, shielding my ears. She looked at me and smiled again. "God, don't forget to pack protection. You can't be too prepared," she added, her gaze unflinching. "Of course, Mom," I responded resentfully back home. I spent the evening with Monica and marked next Saturday on my calendar. Sarah advised me not to spend too much time discussing my previous marriage, but to respond to any questions Monica posed about it. I was nervous addressing what had happened with an outsider, but Monica was quite empathetic. She then told me about her 15-year marriage, which ended when she forced her partner into bed with Isabella, their neighbor. The syphilis exacerbation I contracted was nothing compared to the humiliation I felt at my primary doctor's office. Don't get me wrong. The specialist and the 2 medical workers I spoke with were completely competent. However, I could tell they were overwhelmed by having to deal with me when I identified 6 different males as recent partners to report. Things got better. 6 notifications. After scrutinizing my sheet, I overheard one nurse muttering to another, "It's probably a good thing she's under 25. I probably would have ripped her a new one if she had told me plainly." However, I had to acknowledge to myself that the remark sounded absolutely terrible when I heard it. I hadn't given it much attention, but I believe I'd been taking advantage of my single status for quite some time. I must have become angry when Nathan dumped me following his divorce from James. I suppose I was hoping for someone to replace Nathan and James, but I didn't come close. How could I replace what James and I shared for 23 years, and how could I replace my great relationship with Nathan? I'm not sure. Maybe in my mind I was compensating for quality with quantity. I never gave much regard to how many men I slept with until I had to consider my partners. It was clearly foolish and frivolous. To date most of my partners without protection. I disliked the fact that I was an alcoholic prostitute. I was always in my right mind and aware of what I was doing, and I usually chose people who appeared ideal and were prepared. I believe, as the old saying goes, when you lie down with someone, you also lie down with everyone they've laid down with before. James, Monica, and I were married about a year after our most memorable date. We both still had trust issues, but we dealt with them with affection and love. Monica was my friend in need, and that is not an exaggeration. After splitting up with Isabella, I was lost. I had no notion how to go on a date. For goodness sakes, she let me fumble for direction here and there, and we kind of became together, even if I couldn't put money on it. I've discovered the ideal partner to grow old with Isabella. When I became accessible for usage again following the issues, I grew more wary of my partners. Menopause could have played a role here. Some of it was most likely due to the fact that while I looked great when I reached 500 20s, some things 30, some stopped paying attention to me. To be honest, there are significantly more unmarried women in their 40s and 50s than men, so the rivalry was tight in those age categories as well. If someone had asked me a few years ago, I would have said it was settled. I intended to grow old with my devoted husband, James. However, because I was an idiot, things did not go as planned. I'd inflated my bond with James. I mistook his decency for his shortcoming. I believed he loved me enough to forgive me at any cost. I moved into an elderly care home a few years ago. My previous home was too large for me as a single person. I see my children and grandchildren every few months. It took several years for my relationship with my children to return to normal. James and I have maintained a lovely friendship, despite the fact that we stopped snacking when I understood that growing closer to him was bad for me. After a long period of being single, James eventually began dating again. I admit to being envious of how much he resembles Monica. Whenever the entire family gathers for a special occasion, I can't help but want to witness their lustful looks. I felt like throwing up. It must be me. Was it worthwhile? I asked myself, and I never like the answers. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.